Welcome to Idaho Bigfoot. I'm your host, Jeb. Today we're discussing an interesting topic that will likely be a bit controversial as well. We all tend to have an opinion on these kind of topics, and I am no different. Discussion is good, dissension is not. All I ask is that you keep your comments civil and don't try to argue with anyone. Your help is greatly appreciated, guys. So to start us off, let's go over a few disclaimers. First of all, I am obviously assuming that the entities people have claimed to experience actually exist, and that the eyewitnesses are telling the truth. I am also assuming that Bigfoot exists. I know many have their own theories about the existence of Bigfoot and cloaked entities, or are super skeptical and don't believe any of it. Everything I share here is my own opinion. Second of all, as said, these are all my own opinions. I apologize if they offend people. That is certainly not my intention. I love hearing different opinions. I'm just sharing some of my own. I do not want to fight, but I am merely making my stance on the matter available to anyone who wants to hear it. I don't feel that anyone who supports the theory that Bigfoot can cloak is stupid, nor am I shaming them. Third of all, I'm also not an expert on biology nor Bigfoot. And in all honesty, no one is truly an expert when it comes to Bigfoot or Sasquatch research. Unless we get someone living with a group of Sasquatch and documenting every behavior and idiosyncrasy of the individuals in the group as a whole, much like Jane Goodall did with chimpanzees, no one really knows much about Bigfoot. Some, like Jeff Meldrum, are experts of footprints and anthropology, but none of us know all there is to know about these creatures. And that brings me to my fourth and final point. If we had our own sightings, we're basing everything we know or believe off of what we saw. Or if we hadn't had our own sightings, we're basing everything we believe off of what someone else has seen, trusting that not only are they telling the truth, but they are telling it the way it happened. So everything here is very subjective, so just keep that in mind. Now let's dive right in, shall we? We will discuss why I don't think Bigfoot can cloak. Then we'll discuss a few stories subscribers have sent in to me describing their experiences. And then lastly, we'll discuss what I think is actually behind all of the sightings of cloaked entities. To start, let's discuss Bigfoot cloaking. This is one I've heard a lot. According to Kyle Hill with the YouTube channel Because Science, there are 3 types of invisibility. But the easiest would be to reroute photons around you, causing anyone to look in your general vicinity to not be able to see you. The problem is that no photons would be entering your eyes, and therefore you wouldn't be able to see. So, although you are invisible to everyone around you, they are also invisible to you as well. A thermal camera would also be able to still see your thermal image. However, if you were able to reroute a considerable enough amount of photons to your eyes, you would be able to see, but would also have your eyeballs visible to everyone around you, giving your position away. In other words, a floating pair of eyes. Now some posit Bigfoot can vibrate his body at such high speeds that it distorts the light around him, causing him to appear invisible. Others claim his translucent hair reflects light like a mirror. Coupled with dark skin, these reflective hairs blend Bigfoot into the scenery like a special ops sniper. Let's start off with the vibration theory. According to some, although you could, in theory, reduce a being's visibility by vibrating it fast enough to confuse the eye, you'd have to vibrate the whole object coherently, not the atoms individually. Basically, you're just shaking the person really hard, which would probably kill them, and isn't something anything else in the entire animal kingdom seems to have, even though it would be very handy. And to clarify, this goes for any type of invisibility. So many animals could benefit from the ability to turn invisible or change their appearance at will. And as you know, cuttlefish and octopus can camouflage incredibly well, but cannot turn invisible. They also live in a completely different environment and look completely different to Bigfoot. No animal on land has the ability to camouflage like is postulated for Sasquatch as far as anyone knows, let alone turn invisible for reasons that we will discuss further. Back to the explanation. It's important to note that the necessary vibration rate is in the sonic range, so it would be very noisy. And even to the human eye, the object wouldn't be completely invisible, just blurred. The same goes for a propeller on an airplane. The reduction in visibility is because the human eye samples information at a finite rate. Video cameras wouldn't necessarily have this problem per se. But the bottom line is that you would hear it, and no one I've heard has reported that. And it would be very hard on the creatures physically, too. What specific effects would it have? I do not know, but I do know that if you vibrate a solid object at high enough frequencies, it will cease to be a solid. But before you get to the vibrational energy it would take, you'd shake your object apart at a molecular level. I figure something similar would also take place for a Bigfoot. So yeah, no, not happening. Now, the hair idea is the most reasonable, but has issues. Again, people posit that translucent hair would reflect light like a mirror. Coupled with dark skin, these reflective hairs blend Bigfoot into the scenery. The problem is that polar bears have mostly clear hair, and their skin is black, and yet stick out like a sore thumb unless it's snowy out. According to EarthRangers.com, when the sun's rays hit off the polar bear's transparent guard hair, some of this light energy travels into the hair and gets trapped. This energy bounces around inside the hollow part of the hair, causing a reaction called luminescence, which is an emission of light. This happens every time the beam of light makes contact with the side of the hair. When sunlight shines on polar bear fur, it causes a reaction known as luminescence. The luminescence is accelerated by light-scattering particles. If you were to look at a polar bear's guard hair really closely through a super microscope, you could see tiny little bumps. These are the light-scattering particles. As the light bounces around in the hollow guard hair, it hits these particles, which disrupts the beam of light, causing it to break up into more beams that are sent off in different directions. The beams continue to bounce around, creating more luminescence until they reach another light-scattering particle, and the process happens all over again. All this bouncing light inside the guard hair causes whitish light to be given off by the hair, helping the polar bear look white and blend into its Arctic snow and ice environment. Light-scattering particles aren't only found on the inside of the hairs. There are also particles found on the outside. Polar bears pick up salt particles from swimming or being near the salty ocean water. These salt particles, along with the hair's coarse surface, also act as light-scattering particles that cause even more beams of light to bounce around, creating more luminescence. When the sun shines on a polar bear, the UV in the sunlight shoots down to the base of the guard hair, where it makes contact with the bear's dark skin. When the UV light hits the skin, it produces a whitish color due to fluorescence. So although polar bears have a couple small differences in the construction of their hair as compared to what people theorize for Sasquatch, with the addition of salt water adding to the luminescent effect, it is close enough though for me to rule out the hair theory. Now, some people claim that Bigfoot turns their hair and can actually change the direction of each hair purposefully. But the ability to harness each and every hair and turn and manipulate them is highly unlikely in my opinion, especially because it would need to do this in a matter of seconds. The idea that a frightened creature could purposefully turn hundreds of thousands, if not even millions, of hairs on command in just a second or two, as some claim, is frankly not something I can understand. But back to Kyle Hill. If you were invisible, you would have an incredibly hard time moving around. Your movement sense or proprioception would be out of whack. And with all the tripping hazards in the woods, that would be hilarious and certainly not practical. Now, I saw an episode of the Can-Am Missing Project on YouTube entitled The Mount Rainier Cluster of Missing People. It was posted about 2 years ago. Now, to just interrupt for a second, I know people have strong opinions about David Paulides. Some people think he's the greatest guy ever, and some people, if they saw him in person, they'd probably spit at him. Again, let's keep the comments friendly. He's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about someone's story that he shared. Anyway, in that video, David Paulides was told about how a police officer in Ohio, and this was before the individual became a cop, I believe, encountered a cloaked entity. To make a long story short, he was walking through a property his grandparents had into an area where his friends were camping in an attempt to scare them. He began hearing branches snap and everything was dead quiet. He ran and was followed by it until he grabbed his knife and turned to confront the thing, whatever it was. He saw the grass at knee height parting its way toward him and then it stopped immediately. He thought this was all in his head until he saw the grass was depressed in the spot where this thing stopped. And he cussed once he realized this. This thing, whatever it was, ran off the way it came. It was a moonlit night and happened about 10 years ago now. Another one that was featured on the Can-Am channel, if I remember correctly, talked about how this fellow was by his truck when a cloaked being ran down a gravel or shale covered hill. I tried finding the video. I asked other people if they could find it. No one could. So I'm just going off of memory here, guys. If I get any of the details wrong, I apologize. If you know where this story was, if you have the link to the video, please share it down below. But doubtless, seeing this thing coming towards him, the guy grabbed his gun and it halted immediately, then beat feet and ran off. These two encounters will have a good bit of importance here in just a minute, so don't worry, we'll circle back to them in due time. But now, without further ado, let's now go over the stories submitted to me by my subscribers. I might make a separate video covering just their stories down the road, I'm not sure. If you are watching this well after my posting and believe you've heard these before, you may well have. Doubtless, I know I will cover them here. To start us off, I have a gentleman from the UK. He has a YouTube channel named Tree Deep Outdoors. I'll leave a link down below. He said, along with working in the woods, I run a channel that focuses on wild camping, and so I'm in the woods a lot. I was in what they call here in the UK an ancient woodland, a woodland with a lot of history, a remnant of the original wildwoods that were part of the landscape of Great Britain since the last ice age 10,000 years ago. This forest has been documented since Roman times. It was established as a wood pasture in Saxon times and a royal forest in Norman times. It is of international importance and essential for wildlife species specific to such habitats. I've had several fairly strange experiences in these woods, but I'll focus on the cloaked being. It is a short one, but here it is. I had just entered the deep woods off the trail in the pines, and as you do when walking through the woods, I'm making sure I don't trip on anything or get my eye poked out, and so I'm looking down, looking up, looking down, looking up. As I'm walking along, I notice something in my peripheral vision that catches my attention, and therefore I stop and focus on the cause of my attention. Probably a good 3/4 of the way up this tree is this cloaked being. Very slender, tall, transparent being, with very long arms and legs. As I'm watching it, I realize it's watching me. It begins to move. It's reaching for the next tree. I go to grab my phone out of my pocket to try and capture some video of this entity. I go for the camera on my phone, and as I look back up towards the being, after a split second of looking away, it's gone. It was at that point I realized the woodland was very quiet. After a couple of minutes, the woods came alive with noise again. Completely bizarre experience. A few months later, I was watching Missing 411 with my partner. I think it was titled The Hunted. At the end of that documentary, a woman shared her experience with this very same entity. I turned to my partner like, that's that thing! Very short, very brief, but very true. I then asked if this entity was standing on a branch, or was it clinging to the tree? How tall did he think this thing was? How far away did he think the tree it was reaching for was from this thing? And lastly, was said tree close by or a good-sized distance away? He said the entity was clinging to the tree. Super long legs and arms allowed it to hug the tree with ease. It must have been a good 8 feet tall, and the tree it was reaching for was between 4 to 5 feet away. The distance between us must have been a good 25 to 30 feet away. From what I could tell, it didn't have any hair on its head. Its head was narrow but smooth. If you're familiar with the Slender Man character, it was almost like that, just extremely tall with extremely long limbs. So once again, I want to give a shout out to him. He seems like a really stand-up guy, and that was a fascinating, if not very creepy, experience. Now for our next story, we have another gentleman who wrote into me, but I did not get express permission to use his name, so I'm going to keep that private. Anyway, to get to his story, he said, "Evening. I was born and raised here in Olympia, Washington, and I just turned 51 this past December. I grew up here and have always enjoyed the outdoors. I bow hunt, dabble in fishing, and look forward to my monthly solo camping adventures down in Gifford National Forest, Mount St. Helens area. I've been going down there for years, and as much as I like getting in the river in the warmer months, I think winter camping is the most peaceful. I disperse camp as I want to be alone, and I'm either on my KLR 650 in the better months or my Bronco in the winter, and I always like to go poke around in the woods to see what I can see. I generally don't follow trails. I get in there and find the game trails, or I make my own. I'm also not the dude with a bell or yelling, 'Hey bear!' I do my part to be as quiet as possible and observe. Now, in my opinion, anyone with an open mind who actually spends time in the woods will eventually see and experience some weird stuff, whether they admit it or not. I have been aware of Sasquatch for a while now, and in fact that's why I started my little YouTube channel. I have some experiences with them you might like as well. Regardless, that's one of those doors that can't be closed and changes everything in a person's life. Rocks the boat of perceived reality, if you will, in a good way. Anyways, over the years I've seen and heard other things as well. On this particular occasion I was down in Gifford at my original spot. It's about 15 miles into the national forest and then down a road a bit where it dead ends right at the Kispus River with a view I fell for my first time there. I don't recall what month, but it was early fall and leaves had started to fall. I left camp the morning, walking down river, just to look for sign and explore the old braids of the river. They are old and most have a beautiful layer of soft green moss on the top and fairly thick brush to the outside. They can be like a little maze and you can't always push through. I was in between the river on my left, maybe 200 yards, and the old road, probably double that to my right, and was following the seasonal creek that ran in between. There are generally lots of deer, elk, and coyote sign. I had popped out of the brush into this open area, about 80 yards deep and maybe 30 across. It had good cover of moss. I could hear the creek and made my way to the back toward the right corner to get on the water again. As I walked in, I could see it brushed and boxed in quickly. But I wanted to find a game trail versus walking back out and around on the moss and rocks. I was about halfway in when I heard a huge crack break from the corner I was walking toward. I stopped dead in my tracks. I was about 35 yards from the brush line and the creek. When I looked up, I saw what looked like a whole patch of the brush moving all at once, but kinda not. I started walking right to it because I wanted to know what it was, but then I really seen it move. I stopped again, and when I did, it made the same kind of purr-click noise, like from the movies. Just as I was thinking, holy moly, and no way. Just to my left, like right there, something frickin' huge growled the meanest, biggest F-U growl I ever heard. I quartered to it and drew my Ruger without even thinking. Funny thing was, I was aiming at about 10 feet up where the growl came from, apparently head level, and I could see nothing. No weird like I just saw. Nothing but air and the rock and the moss on the ground till it brushed in. Having just seen the big pixel predator deal, which is now somewhat behind me, and this huge growling thing I can't see in front of me, I started backing out fairly quickly. As I turned back up toward camp, I did not hear or see anything behind me. I looked several times as I walked out. About halfway back, I cut across that creek and into the woods so I could get to the old road I drove in on instead of walking the river back. Basically, the quickest way to camp to have a cup of coffee to go with the big dip I was having after that. I was almost back when an alder just off the 2-track and to my left, about 20 yards in front of me, just started shaking like a hurricane hit it. Leaves are falling like rain, and I'm thinking... I couldn't see in the tree because there was a cedar in front of it. So I ran through the fallen leaves to the other side and turned back to look up in the tree. I was floored as I heard the purr-click deal again. I could literally see the thing standing in the tree just like in the frickin' movies. It was right there. I just looked at it, and then I seen something even more wild. That huge pixel predator thing like rocketed jumped out of that tree and like literally not flew, but like super jumped way up high into a huge cedar tree at least 100 yards away. As it went, it just got smaller in appearance and looked fuzzy blurry, but I saw it land in that cedar and the whole thing shook. At that point, I just stood looking at the alder, distanced to that cedar tree, and just tried to process what I just saw. I had taken my eyes off of it, couldn't see it anymore, and all I knew was that I just had one of the weirdest mornings I ever had in the woods. I walked back to camp, had my coffee with a nice fresh dip. Other than my wife and my best friend, I have not shared this with anyone else. When I saw your post and that pic this morning, I knew I wanted to share it with you. So thank you for letting me share, and if you want to share it with others, I don't mind. So that was an incredible story. I followed up by asking if he thinks it's possible that the thing he saw could have used a form of propulsion, like a jetpack that he just couldn't see, maybe. I asked if he remembered if it was standing on a branch or if it was clinging to the tree. He replied, I agree that the distance and speed are hard to imagine. It was quite the thing to see. Honestly, it is entirely possible that it had some sort of propulsion or jetpack type of deal. It would make what I saw easier to palate. IMAO. When it left, it seemed like the sound was like it whooshed away. Kind of like when it first started and all the leaves were falling, like a little hurricane or big wind. As far as how it was in the tree, it appeared to be standing there and using arms, kind of like we would. So yeah, that was an amazing story. I appreciate him sharing that with me. Another gentleman said that he was hiking off-trail with his dog in the Market Lake area just north of Idaho Falls and saw a cloaked entity. At least that is the best way he could describe it. I asked him a few questions about, what kind of wind direction does he remember, all sorts of different things like that. He did a very nice job giving me as many details as he could. So let's get right into his story. He said it was late June of 2021, and my dog and I had hiked in approximately a half mile from the Jeep trails and out into the desert northeast of Market Lake. It was a very hot day, and the dog was showing it, so I called him in to me for a drink from my water bottle. We both had a drink and headed us back to the truck. We had started back maybe 20 to 30 seconds when I sensed the presence of a large animal behind me to my right. We were in head-high sagebrush, somewhat tightly packed. So as I took the next step with my right foot, I turned and looked over my right shoulder and saw passing behind me about 10 to 12 feet away a large cloaked figure. I saw it for probably 3 seconds total before it was gone into the sagebrush. I wasn't terribly spooked by it, but I also did not care to chase after it either. My dog didn't respond to it at all. It was a somewhat windy day. We go out to that area often. This was the only encounter of this kind we've had. We see lots of jackrabbit, several coyotes, and scared up a nice buck at extreme close range once too. Anyway, it was a bizarre experience. Hope this can help. So to start off, I want to thank these gentlemen for sharing their stories with me. I greatly appreciate it. For those who are listening, if you have had any sightings that you'd like me to share, you can email me at idahobigfootchannel@gmail.com. Just remember, all the stories must be true. Hoaxing and lying only hurt people. They hurt you and they hurt me. Even if the story is strange, as long as it actually happened, that's what matters. So anyway, guys, just wanted to thank everyone for sending me their stories, and if you guys wanted to send your stories as well, I wanted to make sure I extended that invitation to you all. But to get back to the video here, what are my thoughts? I honestly think that it's highly likely that these entities are human. After all, very few sightings I've personally heard show someone seeing a Sasquatch that then disappears. And I do question those. I'm not saying they're liars, but I do suspect that they could be influenced by hallucinogens, and to say that fear, adrenaline, and bad lighting couldn't play a part is naive in my opinion. This is a possibility that applies to all sightings: Bigfoot, Dogman, UFOs, etc. I discussed how hallucinogens could play a role in the type of hallucinogens that could be involved in the video that I will link at the end of the video. Now, I do want to let it known that I have had some very good responses to that, just talking about their experiences with hallucinogens, and how it doesn't really make everything around you look fake. It just kind of adds to reality in a strange way. It's hard to describe what you're seeing. But I will say this, that with different individuals, you'll react differently. Just look at how some people have no problem eating wheat and other people do. Some people have no problem eating peanuts, other people do. So I think different psychoactive things could affect people in very different ways. And, again, you include bad lighting and you include something that is there, and you could have a number of different things happen where it looks like it disappears, but really that's your mind playing tricks with you, or something playing tricks with your mind. And then again, these creatures are believed to put out infrasound, which can mess up your mind and can cause some people to black out for a little bit. And next thing they know, they're still standing and whatever was in front of them is gone, or they're in a new spot, they fell down, they passed out, a number of different things. So have someone standing there watching something, if it lets out any kind of infrasound, it could make someone black out just for a few seconds, long enough for it to get away. Next thing that person knows, that thing is gone. And your mind could play tricks with you, making you think that you saw something that you didn't, trying to understand it. You could try and figure it out, and over time your sighting changes. I don't know, right? It's all theoretical because I wasn't there to see what these people claim they saw. So at the end of the day, I don't know what may have happened with those individuals, but there's really not a lot of sightings I've found that talk about that. But let's also not forget the holograms are a real thing. They can cause someone or something right there in front of you disappear into thin air. Now, is there a whole hologram display out in the woods to mess with people? I really don't know, but it is a thought. But anyway, the large majority of sightings of cloaked figures happened after 1980. That's pretty recent as far as time goes to us now. And multiple people felt like a weird guy was following them. Not a massive beast. Now, the fellow whose story I read last, he did say it felt like an animal. So, that's how he felt. So there are some accounts where that doesn't match up. But I do want to note that his dog didn't react. With Bigfoot, typically speaking, the dog reacts right away. The dog actually tends to react before the human does in a lot of sightings I've heard that seem legit. So that's something you need to keep in mind as well. If it only senses another person is out there that doesn't care about them, maybe the dog wouldn't react, right? It's something to think about. Dogs can somehow feel people's energy. It's a really amazing thing that they have. It is a sixth sense. Sixth sense, not sixth sense. So the fact that the dog didn't react is kind of interesting to me. But then again, maybe the dog couldn't even see anything. But that's something to keep in mind. But with the behavior of a lot of these sightings, it makes me wonder if they're psych tests. After all, watching someone and allowing them to experience something strange like that, and watching A, how they react in the moment, whether scared, angry, etc., and B, whether or not they decide to talk about it, how they talk about it, how long it takes them to talk about it, reveals a lot about them. Just look at Facebook and how they've admitted repeatedly that they have shadow banned people and mess with their accounts, settings, friend lists, and more to see how they react. YouTube has done that as well with subscribers, unsubscribing people, making sure they don't get notifications, all sorts of things. So not that YouTube or Facebook is behind this, but my point is that few people are above it. This type of behavior is well within the realm of possibility. Another example at psych tests and seeing how people react would be the Stanford prison experiment, which is well documented and showing how there are a lot of tests on seeing how people react. Besides, the forest would be an incredibly difficult place to test this kind of technology. So many little details that would really push the limits of the technology. Now, whether or not a government agency is testing its technology in areas that really test out the ability and capability of their equipment with the added bonus of testing people's reactions, or whether or not it's a university that has heavy funding doing this, I do not know. It does make me think of an episode of one of my favorite TV shows, Castle, Season 7, Episode 3, if I remember correctly, which featured a similar idea. But anyway, doubtless, it explains why the things people have reported ran when confronted with a weapon. Remember that? Well, a demon can't be affected by a knife, can it? And why would it even be afraid of one, right? Some people postulate that these things are demonic. Well, that would tell me it isn't. A 600-pound Bigfoot wouldn't be afraid of a knife either, would it? And an alien with super advanced technology probably wouldn't either. But a guy tasked with seeing how capable the equipment is? Well, a human knows how well human weaponry works. Besides, if it is a $100 million suit or something along those lines, it would be something you wouldn't want to slash or shoot. It also likely doesn't have any built-in body armor, once again explaining why these things ran from someone armed. Also, a couple stories I've heard talk about how these things refuse to get near water. I know that small cameras that record high-quality video tend to have a difficult time with overheating. One of the only ways to deal with this is to remove any and all waterproofing, meaning that the equipment would be fried the moment it touches water, and a suit that, once again, costs a substantial amount of money isn't something you'd want to break on your watch. Notice that you never really hear about these things being seen on rainy or wet days. Now that could just be because people aren't as active outside on those days, but the waterproofing theory could be correct as well. And let's not forget that when something heats up, it can give off heat waves. I've heard several stories where on a sunny day, the entity is extra distorted with the effect of heat waves all over its body. The person in the suit's body heat combined with the heat of thousands of little cameras and OLED screens could cause that effect easily, I think. I think it's a little out there, but it is a much better explanation than anything else I've heard personally. And remember the story about the predator-type entity jumping out of the tree? Well, if you can camouflage a suit molded to your body shape, I suppose the same tech could apply to a jetpack or other form of propulsion. It's a thought. Now, the size of a couple of these entities might seem like humans aren't the cause, like the entity Tree Deep Outdoors saw, and that's fair. But to be honest, people have reached 7 feet in height before. Basketball isn't the only career path for someone that tall. I'm about 6 feet 1 inches tall, and have a 6 foot 6 inch wingspan. I also know people who are 6 foot 6 inches tall, and I know people who are 6 foot 8 inches tall. So a person that is tall and lanky would potentially look like Slender Man, as he described, if wearing a type of suit that distorts your form and figure. Plus, a quick glance with adrenaline could cause you to have difficulty estimating height. And by the way, I'm not saying he's wrong, just providing a possible explanation. For all I know, he's 100% right, and that the creature or thing that he saw was 8 feet tall, and that my explanation in this case is wrong. But I do feel like it could work here. And people who are very bulky also exist. Just look at Brian Shaw, 6 foot 8, weighed 450 pounds in his heyday, and is about 385 pounds last time I checked. According to Healthy Celeb, his chest is 60 inches, his biceps are 23 inches, his waist is 47 inches, and he wears size 16 shoes. He's a big guy. Now obviously he eats and trains as a strongman. I'm not saying people are saying him, but what I am saying is that if he was walking around in an invisibility suit, Bigfoot would be our first guess as well, now wouldn't it? Now, it's not impossible that someone big could be testing equipment, but most describe them as tall, skinny, and lanky. Doubtless, I don't really hear anything description-wise that sounds completely unlikely to see in a human. Now, I have heard people who have commented that they've seen something completely different. One individual noted seeing something swirling in the top of a tree, almost like an object. I'm fascinated by that encounter, and others I've heard. What have they seen? I really don't know, but I feel that most of these sightings are caused by humans, whether they're seeing a human or they're seeing human technology. Could I be wrong? Sure, but it's a strong gut feeling I have. A lot of these things seem to match up. And while I'm speaking about that, it might seem a little off topic, but I just quickly want to talk about Mindspeak, or more accurately, telepathy. Now, how would this work? No one really knows. At least the idea of the native ability that people claim to possess and say Bigfoot has. All I can say is that the ability to single out an individual and talk to them, even when surrounded by people so that no one else can hear them, has existed publicly for some time. It's called directed sound, or an audio laser, ultrasonic parametric speaker, or an audio spotlight. Doubtless they're all the same thing. The basic idea is that instead of pumping air out randomly over a wide area, directional speakers can target sound like a stage spotlight to a precise place where only certain people can hear it. A conventional loudspeaker is designed to spread sound over a fairly wide area. It has a paper or plastic cone that moves back and forth, pumping sound in a wide arc in front of it. The more energy you feed into a speaker, in the form of electric current, the more energy it can pump out as sound. The further the sound waves can travel, and the louder they seem to be. Giant speakers used at rock festivals produce so much energy that they can be heard over a huge area, whether you want to hear them or not. Directional speakers work in an entirely different way from conventional loudspeakers. The biggest difference is that they don't produce ordinary audible sound waves with a single moving electromagnetic coil and cone. Instead, they generate ultrasound, high-frequency sound waves that are too high-pitched for our ears to hear using an array of electrical devices called piezoelectric transducers. These are simply crystals, such as quartz, that vibrate back and forth tens of thousands of times a second when you feel electric currents through them, producing very high frequencies of sound. Ultrasound is used because its higher frequency waves have a correspondingly shorter wavelength and spread out less as they travel, which means they stay together in a beam for longer than ordinary sound would. Also, having an array of many small transducers makes sound disperse less than it would do from a single large transducer. Effectively, then, the ultrasound travels out from a directional speaker in a narrowly focused column, like a flashlight beam. But when it hits something, it turns back into ordinary sound you can hear. I will link some fascinating videos on this topic down below, but I want to share this short clip for you right here, though. Take special notice of what he says, please.
Now, the sound that you're hearing is being created in this beam. It almost sounds like it's coming from your head.
Notice that?
It almost sounds like it's coming from your head.
Now, microwave technology is also supposedly capable of a version of this, as demonstrated in this clip.
The energy of the absorbed microwaves causes brain tissue to very slightly heat up and expand, causing a pressure wave to be picked up by the hearing mechanism in the inner ear. Professor Lin is far from hearing voices, but it could be possible to send coded signals to an agent this way.
Brain is an electrical organ. It is susceptible to electrical signals. Since microwave is electrical, therefore, in principle, one could embed or encode information in the microwave signal such that it could be perceived by the brain.
Now, they said that you can't necessarily transmit actual words, but you can activate ideas in someone's head with the microwave technology. Creepy. Doubtless, if someone is carefully concealed, you would never see them, but you could hear them, at least with the speaker. The stuff that people have reported makes this the answer for me. After all, they say that they have been told things in English 9 times out of 10, if not all 10 times out of 10, with a perfect accent, as if that's their native language. Not some guttural, inhuman language that has been recorded for Sasquatch. Or at least believed to be Sasquatch, but you get my gist. It's not that complicated, at least on paper, and would coincide with the cloaked figures quite well. Especially because most of these accounts typically happen in areas relatively easy to access, whether that be on trails open to the public, or national forests, parks, etc. Why would a hairy creature that howls to each other, bares their teeth to people, uses smells like gorillas that are repulsive to deter people, has supposedly talked audibly in their own language, whaps sticks on trees, throws rocks at people, and clacks rocks together, do any of that if they can Mindspeak to anyone or anything at will anywhere? They shouldn't have a range where they can connect and cannot do so past that range, since people claim that they can do all this spiritually or whatever. I've heard various different theories. So why do everything else? My answer? It's my opinion that they can't mind speak, hence why they whistle as a form of communication, clack rocks, bang on trees, howl, and throw rocks at people. At the end of the day, I believe various tricks and techniques can and should be used to distract or attract them that I will try to share on Thursdays as a short, as well as ideas for different pieces of technology that I want to see, like thermal trail cams and thermal GoPro cameras. I have a few up already. I sincerely hope researchers begin to implement these techniques or are able to get these pieces of tech made for us to use in the field. They might just work. Anyway guys, I hope you like this video. Once again, I hope people understand where I'm coming from with this, and it is coming from a good place. And I greatly appreciate the support I got from some of my subscribers and viewers and followers sharing those stories with me. Thank you guys so much. Again, if you guys want to share your own stories, I'll leave my email address down below so you can just copy that and paste it into Gmail or Yahoo or wherever you're at if you want to email me. But anyway, just let me know, guys. Please feel free to share this video anywhere you like by clicking the share button and copying the link. And also, please like this video and remember to subscribe and click that bell icon so you can be notified every time I come out with a new video. I appreciate the support, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.